I've actually filled out a 140-page grant application for $400,000. It includes like where we've been, descriptions of the project, resumes of every single one of the directors, a logic model, perceived outcomes, like all of these random things. I've had other funders who are at that level or more, double sometimes, who are like, no, I just need a meeting and to hear what you've done, and that's it. They don't require 140 pages. So if you're a level one funder, you're asking your grantees to come up with all these materials, all of this narrative for a chance of getting funding. Hi, I'm your host, Maria Rio. I moved to Canada as a refugee, used charitable services myself, and have been fundraising for over a decade. I love exploring ways our sector can grow, change, and make the world more equitable. The Small Nonprofit Podcast is where we do just that. I believe small nonprofits are where the most transformative work happens. But we've been set up to fail by systems that expect us to do more with less. Every week, I sit down with leaders, fundraisers, and changemakers who are doing things differently. They're building sustainable funding without compromising their values, creating power instead of dependence, and pushing back on the broken systems we've all inherited. You'll walk away with actionable strategies you can use, not just inspiration. So if you're ready to stop scrambling and start building something that lasts, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. If you're new here, my name is Maria Rio, and I have over 10 years of experience helping executive directors like you raise more funds. Today, we're going to be talking about what makes an excellent A+++ funder. And to do just that, I have Caitlin. Hi, Caitlin.
Hey, Maria. I'm Caitlin McBride. I'm a certified fundraising executive. I also have over a decade of experience in fundraising. And my mission is really to make fundraising feel less chaotic and more doable for small nonprofits. I think we've both had A-plus funders in our lives and not so A-plus funders. So this is something that's so important to talk about and get the message out there so that we can hopefully create really good partnerships between funders and organizations.
So this topic came to mind because I recently saw Boulay speak at the Capital Unlock Summit. Seeing him talk to funders directly and be like, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, change your ways, or be smitten by Boulay. And I loved it. And as part of that presentation, he actually put up something on the screen called the Equitable Grantmaking Continuum. And he compared 3 different types of funders. He calls them level 1, level 2, and level 3. Our level 3 are our A+ funders. They're the best ones who get back to you, who see this as a relationship, who want to do the work with you and understand that, hey, a lot of our communities aren't getting this kind of revenue. They're not getting this kind of support. And we need people who understand the societal barriers to being successful as a small BIPOC-led nonprofit, right? And then you have your level 1 funders, which are funders that you're probably going to be more familiar with as a listener. There are people who take months and months to get back to you. They have really rigid processes. They want you to fill up their budget spreadsheet using information that you don't even have. So those are your level 1 funders. So level 1, bleh. Level 2, okay. Level 3, yay. So I hope that you got all that, but we're definitely going to be linking this in the show notes. And we'll go over what we think about this chart that Vu created, what makes someone an A+ versus not, and then also our own experiences with really good and not so good funders.
I really hope that we have some funders listening to the podcast so we can speak to them, because this isn't just a nice thing to do. If you have a mission that you're trying to fulfill and changes that you're trying to make in the world, if you are taking resources away from organizations as part of your funding process, then you're not actually fulfilling that mission. So this is important. And I think it's important for organizations as well to be able to listen to and recognize where certain funders might fit into these categories so you can make strategic decisions about where you spend your time. Because this is a partnership and it's a two-way street. You get to decide who you apply to. Just because they have a deep pocket doesn't mean they're going to be a good partner. So let's get into it. I'm excited.
Okay, I want to start with payout rates. What makes a really poopy funder when it comes to payout rates? It's pretty difficult because in the States, they don't have a requirement on DAVs of how much is paid out each year. So they don't have to pull down and disperse. In Canada, you do, I think it's 5%, which is still really, really small. But one of the things that we see sometimes from really, really poopy funders is they include their own operating expenses as part of that payout. So if my operating expenses to pay this probably Nepo baby to run this foundation, is 3% and I pay out 2%, now I'm at 5%, which is not what we love over here. That's not an A plus funder.
And maybe we can back up a little bit. What is a payout rate? Let's define that.
Sure. So a payout rate is usually an amount taken out of a donor advised fund, which is how a lot of family foundations operate. They have a DAF account, a donor advised fund account. That is an investment vehicle for wealthy people to first donate and get a full tax receipt for that donation. And then that gets invested. And the proceeds of that investment is what you usually pay out. So you never draw on the principal. Let's say 100,000 that you put in, it's invested on your behalf, even though you've received the tax receipt for 100,000. And then the excess of the 100,000 is usually what's given out to nonprofits. So maybe it's 2%, right? Maybe it's not even 5%. Maybe your principal has actually grown now, right? So it's now 107%. We're only going to disperse 5%.
So if the organization is really, I'm going to use Maria's term, poopy, then it means like they're really not paying out the funds that they have actually gotten a lot of the tax benefits for. And there's some research that you can do to figure that out. And it's good to just understand like the bones of the foundations and the people and the organizations that you're planning to partner with.
So a level one funder, according to VU, is someone who has a payout rate of 5% minimum, includes foundation's own operating expenses. So definitely not a good one. But a level three, so our A plus donors, have a payout rate of 10% or more and does not include the foundation's own operating expenses. So that's a big difference from 5 to 10 minimum, but it's something that nonprofits really need. And remember, these donors have already been receipted for what's in the DAF. So this is money that should be coming to nonprofits, but it's usually just being held in trust.
Okay, let's talk about funding restrictions because that is huge. And I see so much frustration all the time, and I get so frustrated every time I hear it. Funders only want to fund new projects. So incredibly frustrating for organizations because they're constantly trying to raise those operating dollars, and funders seem to just want to fund those like shiny new things. And you can't keep making up new projects every year. Our level one funders are awarding mainly those restricted grants and those project grants that cannot go into any operating funds. They're usually like fund new shiny projects. They only fund the launch, but they will not continue to fund after that, which is so hard, especially when you build a program that people rely on. Our level two funder, they will have some more unrestricted possibilities, but still restricting some of their funds to probably things like project-based funding opportunities. And then your level three, your beautiful funders, they're the unrestricted funders. And I remember this from one of the first really good funders that I encountered during a meeting. They were just like, you are the organization, like you're the one serving this community. We love what you're doing, but you know how to spend this money better than we do. And I just fell in love with them at that point. That is such a testament to them understanding what they're funding and who they're funding and putting that trust in the organization to do their job.
Okay, funders, I'm sorry for calling you poopy funders. VU has something called the crappy funding practices on LinkedIn, right? So these are the practices that a lot of fundraisers are super upset about, including the ones listening to this episode. So it's something that really needs to change. Our sector would be greatly improved if we moved as many of you into our A plus categories. So I know it hurts. I know it hurts, but trust me, it hurts us as well. So we want to get to the right side of this together. So let's talk about your grant application process, because that's something that a lot of fundraisers have to spend hours on. I've actually, Caitlin, believe it or not, filled out a 140-page grant application for $400,000. It includes like where we've been, descriptions of the project, resumes of every single one of the directors, right? A logic model, perceived outcomes, like all of these random things. I've had other funders who are at that level or more, double sometimes, who are like, no, I just need a meeting and to hear what you've done, and that's it. They don't require 140 pages. So if you're a level one funder, you're asking your grantees to come up with all these materials, all of this narrative for a chance of getting funding, right? You need to understand that a lot of fundraisers are spending hours and hours and hours of their time to do this. Ideally, you accept grant proposals that are written for another donor or impact reports that are written for a general audience. and not expect all this like really burdensome admin from the organizations.
Yeah, I don't think funders realize how much this detracts from like the capacity of the sector in general. Because as you're saying, like you're spending hours and hours on this. Those hours are costing organizations money, whether or not you give them funding. So you are just taking up a huge amount of resources, even for organizations that you might not partner with. It's a really crappy fundraising practice. And there has to be a simpler way to do it. If you want to partner with an organization, you have to think about them and their processes as well, and the time that it's taking them to complete an application. I'm actually working on one right now, and it's like reasonably simple, but I did notice that one of the questions on the application is, how long did this take you to complete? And I love even just seeing that and seeing the fact that they're thinking about the people who are applying to them, like thinking about their processes and maybe taking that data and taking that into consideration. Because this is a partnership. If you're coming at this with like, you have to jump through all these hoops and do all these dances for us and take all this time, you're coming at this with a huge like power dynamic and a bit of a power trip, if I'm honest. Organizations allow foundations to fulfill their mission. So they need to respect the organization's time as much as we respect their time.
And we did an episode on how many of these applications are actually being funded, even if they have a relationship with the funder. And it's not that many. I think it was something like 3 or 7% of cold applications were actually awarded. So there's a lot of us spending a great amount of time on a very ineffective way of funding organizations. So if you're filling out applications that are taking you 15 hours or more, that's definitely a level one funder. But if this funder is accepting grant proposals written for other foundations or reached out to you, then they're a much better funder. So in Boost Equitable Grantmaking Continuum, the grant application that takes you 0 to 3 hours total is a level 3 funder.
Yeah, and I think that these things are really important to keep in mind for organizations as well when you're strategizing about where you're going to spend your time. Something that I always do when I'm doing grants or building grant processes for clients is really building a grant tracking system that also has a place where you can record how long a grant application process took you, or even just noting easy, medium, hard, so that you can look at that again in the future. And if there was a hard grant application process where it was 140 pages and it was for X amount of money, then maybe that's not something that you want to go for again. If something is going to take you a long time to do it, the benefit has to be a lot higher. So it's just gathering that information and having that as part of your grant strategy process.
I love to move on to the grant decision timeline. So, how long it actually takes someone to receive a grant and then to make a gift. So, a level one is a grantor that takes 3 months or more to make a decision on whether they're going to be funding you, which to me is pretty standard. I've seen organizations take 6 months, 12 months after I apply to gather their board. Their board only meets every 6 months. So the first meeting is to go over application, and the second meeting is to award them. And then your middle level two funder is a funder that takes 1 month to 3 months to make a decision. They're still getting money out relatively quickly. They're not going through a lot of bureaucratic process, which is great, but it's still taking a long time. And a level three A plus funder is someone who gets that decision out in less than 1 month. And do you know what? That seems a little tight, but we've all lived through COVID. We all saw how quickly funds can actually be dispersed when they want to be. So there's not that much reason for the bureaucracy. There's not that much reason for the delay. We're just not treating it as an urgent matter. And our partners need to understand it's an urgent matter.
And do you know what is going to help to speed up that process? A simplified grant application process. If grantors need to go through 140 pages for every single application, that is going to take time for sure. But if you have something that is simplified and streamlined, then I think that's going to cut down on the admin on their side. And yeah, you're going to be able to get those decisions out and the funds dispersed earlier. I just actually submitted something, and the open period for this grant was like less than 2 weeks. We had 12 days to get it in, and they had at least 6 months to get back to us. If you are a funder, if you say that you're going to try to get decisions out at a certain time, get those decisions out at a certain time. Like, we are marking this in our calendars. We are waiting for it. We are waiting to make decisions based on it. We are waiting to write budgets based on it. And decide what programming is going to happen based on your decision. Like this has a real impact on organizations, like not just like their admin and their top level, but on the people that they serve. So if you are saying a timeline, please stick to it.
I think we should put aside booze, equitable grant making continuum for a little bit because I definitely want our listeners to go and check all of it out. There's 18 different ways that booze ranking these funders. And I think we've gone over 4. So there's a lot more for you to dive into. But before we leave you today, Caitlin, what has made someone an A plus funder for you?
For me, it has really been about the process. And then once you are funded by them, about the trust, being open to having a conversation, like that is huge. If I can get on a call with a funder and take 20 minutes to understand their priorities and for them to understand the work that we do, we can save each other so much time. I can either decide this isn't the right fit for me, or I can craft a proposal that is going to be much more strongly aligned. That part of the process, being able to have a conversation with a human being, a streamlined grant application, easy to do, easy to submit. I love it when they're open to applications that have been submitted to other organizations. And then I've worked with funders where they don't require any kind of a report. It's just let's put a phone call in our calendar for 6 months from now. We'll catch up, see how your project is going. And we just love to see what you're doing, see what you've made happen. And that is amazing. Having that relationship and having that trust and not putting the onus on organization to jump through all of these hoops and to spend so much time and effort on something that may or may not pan out. Being an A plus funder, being a level 3 funder, not just like a lovely thing that you can do in the world. It's effective and it's efficient. If you want to spend your money wisely, don't take up a lot of it through your own admin.
I agree with so much of that. I think something else that I would add is they have a lot of flexibility and maybe they're willing to jump in on other things that aren't directly tied to their funding. So, for example, hey, you're funding this program, but we have this advocacy piece out right now. We would love if you would co sign it with us. So, they're willing to share their branding, their platform with you as well. I think that makes someone an excellent funder. What do you think makes someone a not as great funder?
I definitely think having to jump through all the hoops, not being willing to meet with organizations or have a conversation with them. I understand that it can be a lot and be overwhelming, but I think that you're going to get a much higher quality of applications if you're open to having conversation with charities who want to reach out. So yeah, not having a very like closed application process, not providing feedback either. If you're just keeping charities in the dark about how they could improve and if they even should apply again, then again, you're taking up precious time and resources. You're taking that away from the charity. And yeah, organizations that require so much reporting that cannot be replicated from other things. Like you have to do their own very specific reporting and pull in all these numbers that maybe you weren't tracking before. Like it just takes up so much of the charity's time that could be spent delivering services and doing the things that you're actually funding. What about you? What makes a not so great funder for you?
So I definitely agree with a lot of what Vu has on his level 1 funder category, but something that's not there is the way that they treat me, right? So if they treat me or my staff in a way where it seems like they feel comfortable bossing me around, then that makes me pretty uncomfortable. And then the other thing that I don't love is when foundations say, hey, we had 300 applicants for this pool of money and we funded 2. So like when they lack that kind of like self-awareness of you just wasted 297 organizations time and money and like you could have closed your portal after 5 applications, you could have done something to let people know, hey, we're actually over capacity before that fundraiser or that organization spent all that time, especially since so many of us feel pressure to work on weekends, work after work to get those grant applications in for the deadline, to only find out that you actually never had a chance because they stopped looking at the 30th, 40th, 50th application and they never got to the 300. That's really not great.
Yeah. And I think on that, not being clear about the grant funds that are available, like I've seen funding calls that are out. And then if you actually look into the foundation on the CRA charities website in Canada, you can look in and actually see how much they've dispersed. So it's like these big like open calls, we're funding charities, and you think that your organization is a great fit, and then you go into it and you realize, oh, they only have $10,000 to distribute to everybody. Okay, well, let's be clearer and more open about that. So I know of an organization that they have an open call for applications that are up to $100,000. But in reality, they only fund one organization up to that amount. Everything else is maybe you'll get $5,000, maybe two. But it is such a huge waste of time in terms of when you're trying to strategize what you go for. So not having that clarity about what's available and what you're actually going to give to charities makes you a poopy funder.
I think for people who are listening to this episode, now what? Yes, I already know what I want my funders to do. Okay, I think it's time to start having conversations with them. You'd be surprised how many funders are very open to some of these changes and have never even thought about, hey, 297 organizations wasted time applying for this grant. So if you start closing that knowledge gap, you're already a trusted person that they listen to, that they invest in. So let them know some of these things. Share the Equitable Grantmaking Continuum with them. That will be, again, linked in the show notes down below. So if you want to see all 18 points that VU and RBC Seattle cover, I would love for you to check it out. But that's it for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. Like always, if you want to see our beautiful faces, you can go ahead and do that on YouTube. Please comment and subscribe over there to tell the algorithm that you love this content. And thank you so much for joining us again. We will see you next week. Until then. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Nonprofit. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with our guests directly or find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep moving money to mission and prioritizing our well-being. Bye for now.